Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome you again to our Energy Forum, which this year is a YouTube platform and a YouTube cluster. The Energy Forum is organized by the Estonian Chamber of Commerce in Lithuania, the Polish-Lithuanian Chamber of Commerce in Lithuania, the Primus law firm, and is supported by our dear partners, ENEFIT Green and ENEFIT Group, a major producer of green energy in Lithuania and the Baltics, as well as the Estonian Embassy, the Polish Embassy in Lithuania, and other dear partners. Today we continue our topic about electricity prices and the very, very hot situation in electricity markets. All European electricity markets are red hot. Essentially, today, the electricity price as we speak at this hour of the day is 196 euros per megawatt hour. 1 year ago, the price was exactly 3 times lower, 64 euros per hour, per megawatt hour. So what did happen in 1 year that the price increased so radically, and we have such a radical change in the market of electricity? Well, obviously, the electricity sources or electricity production sources are probably to blame, or the lack of them. And obviously, the macroeconomic situation in international gas markets, international renewable energy markets, and all other markets are very directly impacting also this situation. But apart from talking about problems or challenges, we should also focus on opportunities. Whether this high electricity price is an opportunity for Lithuania as a country, as a potential electricity energy exporter country. What should be done to achieve that, and what are the premises for this? Is it possible? How quickly we could do it? All these topics will be discussed here today by our distinguished guest and distinguished speaker, Mr. Gediminas Uloza, who is the CEO of a prominent Lithuanian private energy production group, Energia, which is fully Lithuanian owned at the moment. And Energia has been on the market for over 25 years, engaging in production of energy from renewable, clean sources, starting from heating energy production, and later going over to electricity production. And recently, Energia completed its newest wind park in Telšiai of 70 megawatts that was developed and built fully from private funds without any public or state support. And this is exactly one of the examples how private initiatives, private monies, private entrepreneurships really change the landscape of electricity production in our region. So without further ado, Gediminas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Robert. And indeed, the high electricity prices is something that concerns a lot of people, a lot of residents of Lithuania, especially private consumers and companies. And unfortunately, this has happened in such a massive manner that the change is threefold or even fivefold in some days, that everyone has to adjust. And why it happened, there are many reasons. Those reasons have coincided. The end of the COVID fear, so the consumption in the industry has picked up. There has been some climatic situation in the Nordics, which has yielded lower hydroelectric production. The winds last year have been slightly lower than usual. And of course, the gas prices have increased considerably all over the world. The demand for natural gas has grown. And all of this added together just shifted the balance of demand and supply severely to the place where the electricity prices as they are now are unsustainable. And unsustainable from a good point of view, because it provides a lot of opportunities for developers such as us or such as everyone in the market to build new sources of production. And what we see today, renewables are the only sources of production that could be built within the next 5 to 10 years. So let's focus on that and let's see, what we can do about this. And on our opinion is very clear. Lithuania has an exemplary position to become an independent energy player. And independent meaning that we will not only import less than we will export, but also we will be independent of movements in gas prices, independent of movements in other markets, and we will be able to sufficiently produce to provide green electricity to our consumers, and also sufficiently for the whole region around us in order to export and to become an electricity exporter. That's an opportunity which is once in a, how to say, in a century, is available for Lithuania, and we just need to act fast. Everyone is in principle able to use this opportunity. All the countries around us will be competing for it. The target and the goal is to be faster than the neighbors and to become net energy exporter before anyone else suffices their internal demand. Then the parity will be reached, and most likely further development of renewables will be slowed down. But until then, as demand is much larger than consumption or than supply, there is just an opportunity that needs to be used and seized for the good matter.
Very well, but actually, you know, there are many components, so to say, that are necessary for being able to develop, you know, new generation, renewable generation capacities in any country, in Lithuania in particular. You know, starting from availability of land, availability of right purpose land. You know, so you know you cannot really build such projects on purely agricultural land. You know, agricultural purpose land. You have to change the zoning. You have to have necessary network capacities. You have to have necessary transformer substation capacities. You have to have necessary, I don't know, export capacities of the country. You know, the necessary electricity connections, interconnectors between countries to be able to export it. So, what are the needed, let's say, components in your view? What are the most needed components which would enable that?
Yeah, so, as I mentioned, the demand supply provides the first and the foremost most important part, which is the commercial viability of the projects. Today, the commercial viability of renewable energy projects is there, and we just need to remove obstacles. So for the next 3 years.
So the main problem has been solved essentially. Commercially, it is viable.
So the commercialization has been a problem since 2015 to 2020. When no one was developing any wind projects and actually building them, just because the tariff was not available, this feed-in tariff from the state. The other support mechanisms were not working, and the electricity prices were not high enough. And that was a problem. Why we do not have enough production today, and why we are experiencing those high prices today, because in the low price terms, commercially, renewables were not able to develop themselves. Now we are on the other top of the cycle, when everyone is able to develop commercially, but the obstacles that are dependent on the governmental and state mechanisms are still there. And the Association of Wind Power has been working together with the Ministry of Energy in quite a good work group manner, just to show how many different institutions in the country need to participate in order for one wind or solar project to be implemented. And this coordination between different institutions is something that is still missing quite a lot. And if we talk about Lithuanian energy independence, especially on this day today, of which is the day of defenders of freedom, it's like a coincidence to talk about freedom and independence. There needs to be
a very symbolic day today, indeed. Yes. 13th of January, the main battle for independence in the 1990 era of Lithuania, when a major victory over Soviet occupying troops was essentially achieved, with of course great loss of human life in Lithuania, but still it's a great victory day. We should commemorate it. Thank you for remembering that.
Yes, so it's very important that this target to become independent energetically or from energy perspective is coordinated within all institutions. And that is to be started with the Ministry of Environment, which sets the rules of the game for environmental permitting, and also supervises and issues the environmental permits. That is the procedure, which is still very much in a gray zone. There have been some attempts to optimize it, but what we feel that probably there is someone or some body or some country even willing to make those processes as difficult as possible. And somewhere in the system, there are obstacles which just do not work in a way that provide opportunities for quick resolutions of simple problems. And there are other institutions, road administration, Litgrid, ESO. They all have their own internal rules and regulations that not necessarily are in line with national energy strategies. So it takes much more time than it could do, and it takes much more effort and provides a lot of risks. I think to speak on very logical and how to say objective terms, I want to show a few numbers just to see where we stand today with renewables, export, import, and where we can be if everything goes as planned by the developers who are in the market. So I will just quickly share one page, and please confirm, Robert, that you can see.
Yes, all is good.
Yeah, so I will just try to go line by line. I took some numbers from Lithuanian regulatory authority for energy. And the first line shows in principle that we do have a consumption, internal consumption of around 11 terawatt hours per year. This to be grown, meaning that this will grow in 2021. We don't have the official data, but most likely it has grown from 2020, which was the biggest hit for COVID. But in principle, that's the balance of what we need internally. Plus, we need a bit more for transmission network losses and balancing and so on. But the important part is the export and imports. In principle, we import at least the same amount that is consumed. We re-export a bit, and that is in principle similar or equal to what we produce internally in the country. These are the numbers for different years, but what we see that like 4 terawatt hours were exported in 2019 and the same amount was produced. So if we did cut the exports and we did cut the local production, we would be in principle importing everything that we are consuming. What do we need and how much renewables would make this balance to zero? It's an easy calculation. I make an assumption that we just build the same capacity of wind and the same capacity of solar. We can discuss, whether it's right or not right, but in principle, that's the optimal way how to utilize networks, to build those hybrid type of installations where the same power line holds both wind and solar, because usually they do not coincide with their production profiles. So it's the most optimal way. And we say 50-50. So from the calculation, it's very simple that we need around 2000 megawatts of wind and solar, and that's it. And we are energy independent. And that's not too much. In principle, what we have today, we have 550 megawatts of operating wind parks, 170 megawatts of solar, according to the official statistics, some of them are in construction and development. And in principle, according to the issued development permits, so these how to say, projects are in construction. We will add almost 1,000 of megawatts within the next 3 years. And in solar, 250 megawatts, and I would assume that there will be more. So in 2025, with the current operating wind farms and the ones with issued development permits, very simple resolution, we will have a total production from renewable energy sources amounting to around 6 terawatt hours, which is already half of what we consume. I make an assumption that around 10% of consumption will grow. So the 10% in consumption will grow. So we will be half where we were a few years ago with energy export. So for that, I also calculate one important factor, that at those moments when the wind sources will be utilized in full, meaning all wind parks will be operating at the same time with the high wind nights. So we'll have around 1.5 gigawatts of installed wind capacity. Of that, around 1 gigawatt will be consumed internally in Lithuania. So we need export capacity of around 500 megawatts. This seems to be fine with Harmony link in the quick plans, a link to Sweden, links to Latvia and Estonia. And it's very important to say that, you know, we will be first ones in the region to have energy surplus during those hours of high winds. So this energy surplus for the projects to be built in Lithuania will be exported to neighboring countries. And in 25, I don't see any problem for that. Most likely there will be a balance. What do we need to get to the zero? We're still missing something. So from here to here, there is a gap. Then we look what will happen after 2025. Offshore, 700 megawatts approved, most likely will go through, you know, if it's not increased to twofold, but at least that I believe will be built. We have around 1.5 thousand megawatts of wind farms currently in development, meaning they are applying or either have received already some environmental permits. That's an official statistics that you can get. So almost half of that is already permitted from an environmental perspective, not yet in the development permits, but this will come. And the other half is in the environmental permitting. The PV parks, so solar parks, are also around 1,000, according to the rumors, how many projects are in the market. And this is pure commercial driven interest today. With that, if we do develop this, and I view 2020 to 2030 as the, how to say, as a cutoff date, we will be able to produce 14 terawatt hours of power from renewables, which will be more already than we will consume. So we'll have a possibility to become electricity exporter. Not too much. The numbers are not impressive, but that's only for the projects which are in development today. We're not talking about any new projects that could become in development in 2 years, but only what's available today. So in principle, if we do everything which is in the plans of the developers, we are net energy exporter.
But actually, it's never the case that, you know, all planned developments also come online. You know, there is a big discrepancy usually.
Yes.
Question how big, but it's always there.
Yeah. So that's the problem. That's the issue I wanted to discuss further. You know, so what can we do? You know, what does government need to do for this to happen? Because commercially and you know, from the planned projects, it might become a possibility. I see two problems. One problem is that, as you said, not all of these developments will end up being real projects. And the problem here, as I see, is institutions. There will be some projects that will be banned or blocked. And also some initiative groups. There has been a rise in opposition to renewables in certain regions, especially, where organized groups of opponents have been trying to make arguments, as much arguments against renewables as possible, just to stop that development. Whether it's driven by actual interest to protect, I don't know, nature, birds, or societies, or whether it's driven and financed by countries around us, it's very hard to tell. But the movement is there, and it has been quite active.
Yeah, sometimes you wonder that, you know, a wind park is actually way worse than, I don't know, an oil refinery plant or a chemical plant or so whatever. You know, it's you know, when you listen to the arguments of so-called environmentalists, it's really, you know.
Yeah. So for those environmentalists, sometimes nuclear power plant is better than wind farm, and you know, from one perspective it is, but only if you look at very short term. If you look at the long term, it's not. You have to do something with the nuclear waste, and the nuclear waste will come and it will have to be buried somewhere. And that's a problem that is never an easy task to be solved. And of course, any disaster that could happen to a nuclear power plant is way more problematic than anything can be happening to the wind farm. But the other question is, apart from the perspective that, you know, there will be some obstacles in the development of those green marked projects, the other problem is here, that with the growth of renewables in Lithuania, the internal consumption will be almost 3 times smaller at night than the capacity that wind farms with their planned installed capacity will produce. So in the worst moments, or in the best moments, when there is high wind and low consumption at night, we will have almost 2.5 terawatts of energy capacity that need to be exported. Which means 2 things. One thing is that, you know, if we don't do anything about the interconnections, we will just not have that possibility. So some of the
essentially more interconnectors are needed, more you know,
much more
gateways of you know, foreign markets are needed.
Yes. Not all the time they will be utilized, but at least for those hours when the winds are going to be strong, we will be struggling. Yes, we have Kronis, so it can take 800 megawatts of this number, but still 2,000 megawatts will remain.
It's a huge number for the current, you know, system.
Yes, it's a huge number, and we are building 700 megawatts to Poland for this particular purpose. From my point of view, together with the offshore, we need to build at least another 700 or even more. So that's, and what does it mean? It means that any projects that will reach ready to build stage in let's say 3 years, they will face commercial problems. The projects that are currently with development permits, they do not face commercial problem. They get either a PPA or they look at the merchant markets, and they in principle are able to make those projects happen from commercial point of view just because the prices today are high and the outlook is positive. However, when we come to year 2025, there will be a problem. The problem for offshore, government is foreseeing, and they're introducing the CFD, and they're saying, okay, this amount of this capacity will be supported by the state, just for it to be commercially viable. The same problem might face the developers of these projects will also face the same problem. The local markets will be saturated. So all corporate consumers will already have PPAs from existing wind farms. The private consumers, which constitute about half of this, most likely will not go into direct contracts of PPAs. So they will be using some kind of a blend of whatever is provided by the largest electricity suppliers. And then the developer who is trying to sell electricity in year 25 will face a big problem. Electricity export will not be there. There is not enough capacity for it to be exported to Poland. And for example, signing a PPA with a Polish company. And locally, the market is saturated.
Of course, there might be, some IT solutions, to, let's say, bring producers and consumers closer together, etc. There are still unused possibilities.
Yes, Robert. Yes, the issue here is that still some of this might be problematic because we need to have exports just in order for those wind farms to be able to produce. And how much exports we will need, we'll probably need even more, because in those times when the wind will blow, the production will be larger. So we'll still have imports in the hours when we have lack of renewables production, and we have many exports in the hours when we'll have excess capacity. So
well, that's exactly the question. I mean, how to balance all of that, So that's
that is the ultimate question that will be problematic for this particular goal. That the developers are here. The wind farms are probably gonna be implemented slower or faster, depending on the obstacles. But the systematic approach of Lithuania as a country needs to be prepared for that period of time. The most likely the cycle will end and the electricity prices will drop eventually. And at some point, all of these projects will become commercially unviable if the state does not do actions, and the actions need to be done now, when it just doesn't seem that the actions are needed, because everything is going as smooth, how to say, train.
So it's essentially a question of investing into the future to essentially grab or occupy, if you like, the market.
Yes. So this part will be developed regardless of what the government does with support schemes. This, I don't know. But from this, we will only cover half of our demand. The rest would cover the other half and provide opportunities for electricity exports.
So essentially, some short-term investments are needed to reach a very long-term goal.
Yes, and short-term, not only investments, but also strategic decisions.
By the government, I mean strategic investments.
By the government, strategic decisions. So if the target is for Lithuania to become an electricity exporter, interconnection capacities are needed. If
more interconnection capacities, essentially, in addition to the ones that are being developed now, which is carbon link, essentially.
If the target is to say that, okay, we will develop those once there is capacity, because I've been hearing those things, when we'll have access, then we'll do it.
Yeah. It will be too late.
Then the developers need to be assured. How can they be assured? The Polish market showing a very good example. CFD tariff is providing assurance for any developer that they will not really care where the electricity will be consumed at what hours, because the state provides for a contract for different support mechanism, saying that in total there is a demand for electricity, and we are supporting developers just to do the projects, and the balancing itself will be done by the state in the next stages once there is surplus. So my point of view here is that there are two ways. One is that we proactively overinvest in export capacities, balancing capacities, extension of Kruonis, batteries, and so on, so that we kind of provide for this balancing opportunity and the prices in the region do not drop in the hours when there is excess capacity. The alternative is that we don't do this, but we provide for financial security for the developers in the form of CFD, in the same way that the offshore is being supported, so that
who should take the lead in creating, let's put it this way, the CFD instrument or environment?
Ministry of Energy first, with the support of the Prime Minister and the Parliament, and that is, I think, a very difficult thing to be talked now, because the problem is very much different today. High electricity prices is a problem that everyone is solving and saying, why do we have to provide any support for those guys? Because the prices are as high as they
are all wealthy anyway, so they are full of money. Yes.
The other thing is that if the state had provided a CFD scheme in year 2018 and fixed the support tariff at level of, I don't know, 50 euros, the last auction went with 50 euros for feed-in tariff. Today, the state would be gaining 4 times more every hour that they would be paying to the developers. No one has anticipated that the prices would go up as much. And the state was always thinking that, the support is always that the renewables developer is getting money from the state. Actually, the support in this particular environment is equalizing the revenues over a long time. In some years, the state will gain, especially in the years of these kind of high electricity prices, climatic situations, and so on. The state will get a lot of revenue. In the years when there is overproduction, yes, the state will have to provide for the developers. But in those particular years, the state will be able to do it because the consumers will be facing low electricity prices. The businesses will be more profitable. There will be more taxes, less support to socially supported groups. So the distribution, if the target is to have low price of electricity in the years when it's high in the market, CFD tariff just does the job. So,
but why is the CFD model or instrument not implemented yet? I mean, what are the main arguments against? There probably are.
So my personal view is that there are 2 things. One thing is that the government sees that this flow of project is going independently of any support schemes, and it is. So my view is that this amount of power will definitely be introduced without any support, even more maybe. The second thing is that the government assumes that any support mechanism is always a net loss for the state because the support needs to be paid. What my argument is that it's not a net loss in the very long run. It's just redistribution of revenues from one year to another. So in years when the revenues are lacking for the developers.
A balancing role, essentially.
It's just a balancing role financially, instead of investing in the actual balancing equipment technically. Of course, both of those things are important. But from the perspective of developers, it's very much safer for us to have 10, 15 years of fixed price and invest in further renewables, even knowing that at some point of time, the electricity price in the market at night will be 0, or maybe it will be negative. But still, then there will be an incentive for state-owned enterprises, private enterprises, to provide for the balancing capacities.
Well, taking into account that macroeconomically, electricity is very quickly becoming the only source of energy for almost everything. So starting from heating to I don't know, transport, to obviously all the things that power our lives, computers, etc. So essentially there is no real premise for decrease in electricity consumption. It will only increase with time.
Yeah.
Especially with change from oil, to electricity, which is happening very rapidly all over the world.
Yes. So my conservative assumption that we'll have 30% growth in consumption by year 2030. It could be that the growth will be higher. You know, if the transport sector really shifts dramatically, if the heating sector shifts. So there could be a bigger need for renewables development. However, the problem of of this hourly disbalances will just grow, because most likely the renewables will not be able to provide electricity in a balanced, equal curve that matches the consumption. There will always be this balance, and someone has to take that risk. You know, what happens in those hours? The argument for natural gas in the European Commission to be treated as a taxonomy object is one of the solutions how to balance the grid. In Germany, for example, they are closing coal plants, they're closing nuclear plants. They are not closing the natural gas plants just because it is a very quick and technically one of the best mechanisms how to balance. You know, the gas power stations can be ramped up quite quickly, can be stopped, and can actually work according to the demand-supply disbalance. This cannot be anyhow done by nuclear. And my personal view is that nuclear nuclear energy treatment as green or a suitable future electricity source is in principle making more problems than solutions. Or because if we would introduce, I don't know, 1,000 megawatts of nuclear into Lithuanian system, that would just mean that at night only nuclear will produce electricity. So all of the renewables will need to be somehow shut down, because nuclear cannot be shut down. So it has to operate at constant rate. So it would just increase this balance in the system. So any baseload mechanism or anything that the politicians are calling as baseload production capacity is actually ruining the renewables model as we are planning to have.
But then how to ensure, this base load, essentially wind doesn't blow, sun doesn't shine, always.
Yeah, Robert, so base load should not even exist as a concept. I think what we say is the balance between consumption and demand and supply. And in the hours when the renewables are not sufficient, there has to be either battery storage, hydro accumulation, power storage solutions, or in the last resort, natural gas.
So, okay, batteries are the solution, and natural gas and hydro. So,
yes, so batteries and hydro is of course a safest and friendliest environmentally way how to do it. But there could be some extended periods when the batteries will be used up, the hydro will be used up, and there will be still a need for electricity. Yes, then the natural gas can take that part, which with every addition of new renewables will be diminishing. If we just say that we can build renewables up to the level where the maximum demand matches maximum supply, we can only take about 50% of Lithuanian consumption from renewables. So the other 50 needs to be imported or produced by natural gas.
Creation of a unified European Union electricity market probably would also help, to balance.
Yeah, so of course, connecting to different countries makes this balance smaller. There is some correlation, but the correlation between the regions is reducing as the distance spreads. So correlation between Lithuanian and German, for example, wind energy production is fairly small, whereas Lithuanian and Latvian, yes, it's very high. So the further you go in the distance, the better you can balance yourself. But the other thing is that the natural gas will be reducing. And if we have a situation like here, when we already have a theoretical export excess maybe we'll only need 20–30% of natural gas in overall system. And if we add the balancing capacities with connections with other markets, maybe it just falls to 10%. So that is probably a much better solution than actually thinking that, okay, the problem is here, so we'll just build a nuclear plant. It just ruins the whole model even more.
It works differently, obviously. Yeah, it is a different model.
It's a different model, and I'm very much, how to say, upset that this initiative from the European Commission and has been, how to say, introduced. And France, of course, has interest in it. Whereas Germany has interest for natural gas, and maybe those two countries, pulling their sheets into their own direction. But that's a situation we're facing. So that's another risk. That if someone talks, and the president has just started talking about nuclear in Lithuania, which was a total shock for me.
But what do you think about these small nuclear plants? Small.
It's Robert. It's the same. They cannot be shut down when they are not needed. So if we add,
but they also function when they are needed. So it's
but
always a
that's the question. Is it better to have nuclear or natural gas? I don't know the answer.
And probably, if you ask me, probably nuclear is better, probably. But of course, it's a very difficult question.
Probably, but nuclear will end further development of renewables. Natural gas can be reducing itself so that the renewables in an integrated European market cover more and more percentage of production and consumption. With nuclear additions, we'll just stop it at some point, because the renewables will become not viable, because this base load will be taken by nuclear power stations.
And that's, of course, the big, let's say, strategic question everybody has to answer.
And that's a strategic question for Lithuania.
And the answer probably lies in battery capacities and battery technology. Whether battery technologies will come to the market in some reasonable numbers and reasonable capacities in the near future or not. That would be probably the deciding factor.
Battery capacities are fine for intraday balancing. So, they're working really well for PV plants, meaning that in the daytime you kind of accumulate, in the evening you disperse it. For wind farms, it's not a how to say, an optimal solution, because wind usually comes in some kind of a weekly patterns. So you've got low wind anticyclone for the whole week, then the wind picks up, then you have a week of high wind, and then it kind of moves and changes. So to accumulate a weak load of electricity, the batteries will definitely not help. We have to talk about hydro accumulation plants, and maybe hydro plants, ordinary hydro plants, which have dynamic regulation, meaning that the capacity of that plant can be reduced or increased depending on what is the situation in electricity markets. That has been helping in the Nordics, and actually why the Nordics have been leading the world in renewables transition, just because they have those flexible hydro plants. They're not hydro accumulation, but they are ordinary hydro, which can hold different amounts of water in their reservoirs.
Yeah, but you need mountains essentially for that, and high water bodies, big water bodies.
Yes. So for wind in our, how to say, region, I think the solution is Kruonis. Estonians are planning to build another hydro accumulation plant, 500 megawatts as a thing, and interconnections, and especially interconnections to the continental Europe, as further away from Lithuania geographically as possible, to be able to find that anti-correlation in the wind patterns.
So essentially, the current exports of Lithuania that are in existence today, essentially 60–70% of them go to essentially Poland,
yes,
Western Europe.
Yes.
So that will probably increase in the future with Poland being under pressure to close its coal plants, with lack of electricity in Germany because of closing of nuclear plants and lack of renewables, and obviously lack of gas as well these days. So probably the let's say the export markets are definitely to the west.
Yes, to the west, and also, you know, Austria, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and all these countries which are in Central Europe, which usually do not have very good, you know, opportunities for wind development. They are further away from the sea. The sceneries are with mountains. It's much more difficult for them to deploy those renewables. And most likely the demand also will come from those Central European countries.
Good. It's actually very interesting and very, let's say, mind-opening view, and it has been a very interesting discussion, you know, to see the different, you know, approach to the problem that everybody now describes as a problem. It is actually a potential very big opportunity, a very strategic opportunity for the country, for even the region, to be an electricity exporter and really solve not only the, let's say, short-term issues, but also, you know, have a very big strategic upside for the future. So I hope that all these, you know, discussions will be implemented, let's say so, in practical terms as well. And definitely, you know, so the government should be proactive, should help with financial means, with investment means, short term, to, let's say, make it happen. And I hope that, you know, in 5 years or 7 years, we will meet again, and then we will, let's say, discuss how to, you know, take more of export markets by Lithuanian or Baltic energy produced. So thank you very much, Gediminas, for this very interesting, very mind-opening, you know, discussion and presentation. And I hope to see you in our next events and our next interviews. And to all our other viewers, you know, we will continue with the most important and most hot topics in the energy sector, also in the coming year. And stay tuned. I'm Robert Juodka, your host as usual, and please subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much. All the best. Bye-bye.